Namaskar. Welcome in this interactive live teleconference of MBA in Healthcare and Hospital Management program. Dear friends, you already know that this MBA program is very important and healthcare and this hospital management is very important topic for our not only for the subject per se, but it is for our day-to-day life. As you know, hospital is the one of the key point for this healthcare delivery service, and you also aware that these days hospitals are very complex structure. The hospital itself can be a very small or very large, maybe like 10 bed hospital, 100 bed, or maybe few hundred beds. So the complexity of the hospital is depending upon the capacity of the hospital, and to maintain the functional status of the hospital, the engineering services starting from the planning, designing and maintenance and providing the different kind of services is very important. The engineering service is integral part of the hospital, and today we are going to discuss about the engineering services of the healthcare institution. To discuss all this issue, we have our experts, Dr. Bidan Das. Welcome you, sir, in these live sessions.
Thank you.
And Dr. Bidan Das is having several decades of experience in this healthcare management program, and with his experience, we will we will learn about this topic. And in between, if anyone of having questions on this particular topic, you can ask the questions. The phone numbers are displayed.
Firefighting, and of course last is biomedical engineering. So these are the main agenda that we have. We will talk of the electrical supply and for the air conditioning system, water supply, medical gas system, maintenance and operation, and of course the workshop facilities. So normally electricity is not generated by the hospital, is given by the state electricity board. They might have a grid, or they might have a distribution board. They can give it to a private company like in Delhi or in many other states, or the government can look after that. So there is something called generation, and then there is something called a distribution. So generation is done by various means, whether it is a thermal or it is a hydro. So we will not go into the details. What we are concerned that whenever we design a hospital, we need to be sure that where is the source of electricity and how far is the distance of the substation or from where we have the HT. It means a high tension transformer, and then of course to the LT panel. LT is low tension, and then so when you have a distribution, so distribution we can have floor wise, we can have department wise, either of them. So how do you calculate or arrive at a figure which is called the electrical consumption? So we need to have an idea on account of the medical equipment. So first is medical equipment. Say for example, we have to have a list of the total number of equipment that has to be installed in the hospital, namely let's say X-ray, which is 80 kV, CT scan 125, MRI 125, cath lab 125, or maybe a radiotherapy unit LINAC 125. So like that we will have to go on tabulating the total electrical load. That is called full consumption, full. And then we add to it the HVAC consumption. So we have a TR. TR means tons of refrigeration. So we can have it 210 TR, 70 TRs each. One becomes standby, two becomes operational, like that. So based on the HVAC load and the medical equipment load, we add to it and arrive at something. And then to that we have the light factor. The light is the normal bulbs and fans, whatever we have installations in the hospital. Once that figure is arrived, we have to have a use coefficient. Use coefficient is normally we use from 0.6 to 0.8 of that figure. Why? Because not 24 hours all the electrical gadgets are not working. So we need to give them discounting factor, and therefore it is calculated multiplication factor of 0.6 or 0.8. So that is how we arrive at the total electrical load. Now what is called distribution? Now distribution is according to the load of that particular requirement. Supposing you have installed the CT scan on the ground floor, maybe on the first floor. So that much kVA has to be allocated to that floor, for catering to the requirements of the CT scan. Supposing we have the OT on the floor and there are 10 number of OTs. So what are the equipment? The OT table is there, the OT light is there, the cautery machine is there, a heart lung machine is there, SCT machine is there. So all these require electricity. So therefore we need to understand the load of that and then give that distribution accordingly. So this is called single line diagram. How the electrical engineer or the consultant gives a diagram, it's called a SLD or a single line diagram, based on which the distribution is arrived at. Now, of course, there will be a source of electricity. We can have a three-phase connection, and then, of course, there will be a standby generator. So, normally we should have a 100% backup. So, 100% backup by generator and, of course, by UPS, because there is a lag time between the mains going off and the generator being switched on, which can vary from 15 to 30 seconds, maybe a little more. Even if you have a AMF panel or automatic panel, you don't need to be manually running around and switch on the generator. You don't need to do that. It's all automated. But there will be a lag time of 15 to 30 seconds. So to cater to the requirements of the 15 to 30 seconds, we need to have a UPS, uninterrupted power supply. Uninterrupted power supply is definitely onto the blood bank, on the equipment that I mentioned, CT, MRI, cath lab, and of course the OT, and some ventilator points in the ICU. So that is how we will calculate again the UPS load. So the one is the electrical load, then second the calculation of a UPS load. And once that is arrived at, so we gave you the idea of how the backup is. Backup is first standby and the second standby. Supposing, for an example, the total load of electricity is roughly around 3000 kVA. So we need to have the first generator having 2500, the second generator having 1500, and third 1000 kVA. So that is how the scalable stuff is done. Why UPS is maintained? Because there are some statutory regulatory criteria based out of blood bank. So you need to maintain the temperature constant, irrespective of the fact that there is electricity or not. Therefore, the UPS connectivity has to be there.
Even vaccines also.
Not that the cold chain and cold to maintain storage. The cold chain and all. Yeah. So that is a little outline of the electrical load calculation, the distribution, and of course we'll discuss in detail about it later on. Now we talk of the air conditioning. Now this air conditioning in the hospital is called HVAC, heat, ventilation and air conditioning. That means it should cater to the requirements of the, not only the temperature, there are some standards that we have arrived at. Some published standards are the ASHRAE, which is an American, the HTRI, and I have maintained the NABS standard, wherein I have calculated a normal operating room complex is, let's say, 20 by 20 feet. So we are looking at 400 square feet, but we have to multiply by the height. So that becomes 400 into 10, assuming the 10 feet is the free space or height. That becomes 4,000 cubic feet. So now the mandate is how to treat this 4,000 cubic feet of air. So yes, number one standard is that it should maintain a temperature of 21 to 22 degrees centigrade, a positive pressure of 15 pascals or 0.25 mm of water column, fresh air allowance, Americans will say 100%, but we say in India, the 100% will be yielding into a lot of power consumption and a lot of expenses on account of admin expenses. So we said general OT is 70%. Specialized OT where it is exposed, like heart, lungs, cardiac surgery or a joint replacement surgery, we would presume that it should be 100%.
Yeah.
Air changes per hour. We are sitting in a place called Delhi, so where the AQI is very high, more than 400. Here, the air changes per hour should be a little more, 16 to 18. But if you go to other places where there is clean air and there is the AQI is quite good, then probably you can do with 14 air changes per hour in India. But in overseas, where the air quality is very good, you can do with 12 also. Yeah. So that is called air changes per hour. Now, positive pressure is 15 pascals, as I said. That means inside the OT, there should be a positive pressure, and there should be pressure gradient and a temperature gradient. The meaning thereby is if you have a corridor and the door of the OT opens into the corridor should have a little lesser pressure than the inside of the OT. So that means inside air can come out, but outside air cannot go into the
OT.
OT. Similarly, the temperature gradient would be, if the internal temperature is 21 degrees, then the corridor should be having a gradient of maximum 9 or 10. So it should be 29 or 30. Then the doctor or the surgeon or the nurse goes to the change room, where it could be 36 or 37. Eventually, they will come out where the atmospheric temperature is around 45. I'm talking of Delhi, but it could be a little different depending on the place. So this is called temperature gradient, and the other one is called pressure gradient. So we must maintain the gradient so that the surgeon and the operating staff comes gradually into the normalization of the temperature. Where shall we have the installation of the HVAC? So definitely it is mandatory that we need to have in the operating room, into the ICU, if you want to have in all the transplant surgeries, in all the ICUs or the KTUs, whatever you have. Sometimes you can have it in the emergency, or radiology definitely, and some people prefer it to having in the OPD. But maybe if the funds are not adequate, then you can leave aside the wards. Wherever the hospital is fully air conditioned, some people have a preference not to have it in the corridor. Thereby, you reduce the capacity of the air conditioning or the compressor. So there will be 2 compressors which is running, and 1 compressor will be standby. So that is the intent. Now, how we will calculate as I calculated the electrical load, how would you calculate the capacity that is required for the air conditioning system? So you need to have an idea of the heat load, this is called conducted load, which is called the heat load. Then the occupancy. Supposing in the operating room, there will be a surgeon, there will be an assistant, there will be a nurse, and there will be a circulator nurse, or anesthesiologist and OT technician. So how many people will be there? And how much is the heat that will be generated by these 6 to 8 people, apart from the machinery and the equipment, which is called the conducted load. So these together we have to calculate the load of the capacity of this, and totally in total, then we get into that how much TR of machine that we are to be installing. So the same applies for ventilation or the lights. Now, when we call the infiltration, that is called the filtration. So in HVAC, there is something called the plant room. There is a control panel. The control panel, then there is a duct by which the air comes and gets into the AHU. AHU stands for air handling unit. So it takes the air from the atmosphere through a 5 micron filter, and then it pushes into the duct. Eventually, when it enters the OT, it should pass through a HEPA filter, which is 0.3 micron filter. Some people, old timers, would prefer an ultraviolet irradiation before the OT, the air enters the OT. We don't really feel that is important, as long as the filtration of the HEPA is appropriate and well tested and calibrated. I think it is quite okay. So that is the intent, how the air will come and how the air will go. Once it enters the OT or operating room, then it enters through a laminar flow. So through the laminar flow, it will enter and it will have a direction. And in the 4 corners of the OT, there will be return air. So the return air, the air will go. Some people would design it such that the return air would also have a filter, so that whatever air is returning out, it does not pollute the environment. So that is another way. Now the intent again is to maintain the airflow. At no point in time shall the air conditioning or HVAC system be switched off. So even if you want to save money on account of electricity consumption, you can switch off the compressor, but the fan coil system should be on. Therefore, maintaining the airflow, air should be continually moving. So there was an old concept of microbiological culture. They used to take it from the AC vents. Those are outdated ever since 2010 and 11. CDC has abandoned those methods. It's not required. What is required is definitely 24/7, 365 days, the airflow shall be on.
Continue. But sir, in this context, normally we always understand air condition means outside hot and inside cold. But in the same way, some exceptional cases like we have a different state like Kashmir and other area where
So it
the outside may be colder, then inside the
Yeah, it will maintain the
heating may
same
be
temperature. There will be
Yeah.
heating coil added to it.
added to it.
Added to it, so that will maintain a temperature
Yeah.
because the outside temperature is -3, -2.
Yeah.
So inside there will be, let's say, 20, 21.
20, 21,
So
and
that
that
is
kind of
how
maintenance is
also-
required.
is enabled.
Yeah.
But there are on account of this, in conditions like ours, whether it is public or private, some people are very bothered about the consumption and of electricity. So therefore, they have this bad habit of switching it off.
Switching off the even for fan also, unfortunately.
Yeah, that is the unfortunate part because there is a lack of little
Awareness.
So I think that should be given to that nurses and technicians so that, Now there is something called negative pressure, which I told positive pressure. So negative pressure and the positive pressure. In positive pressure, the whole air is pushing the particulate matter down onto the surface. On the contrary, negative pressure, the whole thing is sucked out and pushed out into the environment. So where would you need negative pressure? So definitely, number one is microbiology department where you grow the organisms and if you do not have a negative pressure, unfortunately, you are going to spread the infection all over the hospital. So it is 100% mandatory. Number two is infectious disease ward or one cubicle of the ICU where you can put up a hepatitis B patient or a cholera patient and stuff like that. So wherever you have these kind of things, you need to have depending on the kidney transplant unit where the recipient, so we can have in that room also negative pressure because it's immunocompromised patient. So that is a highly risky area. So we need to have negative pressure. Now the next is this is the schedule how the plant room, the compressor, the chiller, the cooling plant, this AHU. So we can have air cooled, we can have water cooled, but we need to have a chiller. There are other methods which are called VRV and VRU systems, but they cannot maintain the standards as I mentioned, like temperature, pressure, relative humidity. I think I missed out relative humidity. Relative humidity means relative to the atmospheric humidity. In places like Mumbai, where the atmospheric humidity is 92%, you need to maintain a humidity of 55%. But in Delhi, where it is dry, so you need to have a relative humidity of 45%. So we have a range, 45 to 55%. So, and it is always in relative to the atmospheric humidity. So I had missed out mentioning this of relative, humidity. So these are the factors that they cannot, VRV and VRU systems cannot give you this outcome. So only the chiller plant can give. We can have a choice, we can have water cooled and we can have air cooled. Air cooled will make less of noise and less of thing because the water will definitely be sprinkling and you need to have a lot of water for that. So you can have that preference, but definitely you need to have a chiller. So we have done with the chiller, and then we can have an AHU. We know what is called ducting, and that is how we have. Now, the issue here is when you are bothered that this kind of equipment will yield into a lot of consumption of energy or electricity, we can have something called a BMS. Now, BMS stands for Building Management System. So, Building Management System is an automated system, which is a software, and it is sensor based. You can automatically on a screen or a laptop or a computer desktop, you can regulate the temperature, the relative humidity, you can switch off, you can switch on, you can maintain the air changes. Sometimes in certain infectious disease cases, septicemia cases, you can increase the air changes per hour. You can do all that permutation and combination. The other thing is called IBMS. IBMS stands for Integrated Building Management System. In integrated building management system, it is more complex. Like you said, it controls the fire, the plumbing, the firefighting, the electric, everything. All are included. I wish some hospitals do maintain these kind of IBMS. They are a little more
costly,
expensive on account of both designing and installation. But in hotels, the large-scale luxury hotels would definitely do that, because that, when you have a green building certification, or energy conservation measures that you are going to implement. So these are some tools that we can.
And moreover, most of our big hospitals and premier hospitals were built more than around 40, 50 years before.
So
Perhaps
those systems were not existing
yeah,
then.
that
So
period.
that
so
is the unfortunate
we are
part.
adopting right now different techniques.
Some degree of retrofitting can be done on BMS, but I do not know whether we can do that for IBMS.
Yeah.
But BMS, we can do some degree of.
Even perhaps that may be the reason, like most of the hospitals, they are carrying the sample patient from one ward to another ward, because of the initial design, it was not.
Yeah, but we can have that, even now we can do that. Even the hospital is built, pneumatic chutes can be installed, for which samples and medicines can be. That is for the internal circulation of services. Now, what are the things that have to be connected with the DG? So definitely, as you can see, water supply pumps, firefighting pumps, fire alarm control panel, fire lift. Now, the lift which is connected to the DG set is called a fire lift. All the lifts are not connected to the, because when there is a fire, you have to switch off the mains, and then the DG will take over. And then whichever lift is connected to the generator is called a fire lift. Now, security lighting, obstructing lighting, and burglar alarms. So, second, the important thing, many people and many designers who probably ignore earthing, but earthing is also important, because we have this equipment called cautery, this, that, so everything has to be connected through the earthing. Of course, there will be a electrical inspection periodically, which looks at the generator sets and stuff like that.
I think, sir, in this context, the common maybe observation is initial plan is something different, like maybe a particular ward is or particular floor is designed to consume 3000 kV electricity, but over the period of time they keep purchasing different instrument, different refrigerator, and particularly the microbiology department, like those things were observed, and gradually their electrical consumption has increased 3000 to like 5000 or maybe 6000, and that may also lead to the fire accident in the many hospitals.
Brilliant. That is exactly, we have encountered such events. I can't name the
Yeah,
hospital
yeah.
and medical college, because I was the person who corrected it. So on inspection, on audit, we found that the consumption rate is double than the
Yeah.
available load. So that became a problem, because there was a short circuit fire, and then
So along with the instrument, they also need to keep updating their electrical
which they
supply
don't do,
thing.
because they take it for granted, and they go on adding an MRI or CT scan where there is adequate load is not provisioned for.
Yeah.
So yeah, you are absolutely bang on the point. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So we look at water supply now quickly. So water supply, we have this system of, an empirical system of calculating it like this: 500 to 600 liters per bed per day will be the water consumption. Then we look at the sources of water, whether it's the municipality water or the borewell water or a tanker water. So there will be alternate sources of water.
So like water supply per bed per person, is it electricity also is there any rough calculation that if it is like 100 bed, this much of electricity?
Yeah, but unfortunately, we need to have an idea of the equipment. So that becomes a little tricky, because you might have a 100-bed hospital, but you don't have a CT scan and a MRI. So the electrical consumption will be less.
Okay.
You are just running a general hospital with some degree of X-ray and lab, and that's about it, and 1 or 2 OT. Then it will be drastically be reduced. But once you have a cath lab, you have MRI or this, that,
And operation theater like
then
3, 4.
becomes no, that cannot be
Yeah.
generalized like that. Now these are the needs of for water, whether it's a cooling system for equipment, the steam generation, plants and gardens, and firefighting system. So we call plumbing and firefighting. So they are a little integrated. The designing is the same, and the guy who installs it will be the same. It will be prudent on our part to give it one person who will do the installation. So these are some little benchmarks we we can use the term called 500 to 600 liters per bed per day. And in certain cities and certain town planning authorities, they say that for the fire, we need to have a maintenance of 2 lakh liters underground, 24 by 7, 365. Over and above that, we will have the hospital water tank.
Per day consumption basis.
Per day. So that 2 lakh liters will be fixed.
Yeah.
Over and above, we will have to have additional water. Now, this is on account of the underground storage, pump to pump. So there is something called a pump room. So the pump room will generate such pressure that the water jet in the event of a fire will cross the topmost part of the building beyond 5 meters. So that is the requirement for a pump room. So it is required by the fire authority so as to give you an NOC fire. You need to have the piping or the pipeline around the building. You have seen red colored pipes, those are called, and the pump room is connected to that. Then we have the service tanks, overhead. Overhead tank is for the sprinklers, So if you don't have the overhead tank, then the sprinklers will not work. Hydrant system for firefighting, the red colored pipeline, the sprinkler. So it is empirical that they need to have a 50,000 liter capacity of
Overhead
tank. Extensive networking of pipes, and then the water line should be above any sewer line, because eventually this water, and then we have to do the ESTP. So ESTP is a combination of effluent and sewage treatment plant. So whatever the water comes out as an effluent or otherwise will be treated through the ESTP. And in case you want to reuse the water, you can do that. You can do that for gardening. You can do that for toilets and all that. But for that, again, you have to have a pipeline connecting the treated water. The same main water will not. So you have a double pipeline. So you need to spend a little more on doubling up the
plumbing.
And apart from that, gardening, I don't think is a big deal. Well, boilers are not so very prevalent, but yes, in certain places they have a laundry for which they need to have a boiler. Not required in small to medium scale hospitals, but then yes, sometimes you might require. Coming to the gas manifold or MGPS, we have these requirements of medical gases, which are oxygen, nitrous, compressed air, and of course suction. CO2 is carbon dioxide is used. You can have it piped, or you can use it through cylinders. But either way, we can. So we have to have a manifold room where you have to control. There is a control panel. There is a left bank. There is a right bank. There is an emergency bank. And the bank now they have changed that we need to have an oxygen generator. Then the second line is the oxygen cylinder, and of course third line is the liquid oxygen plant. So distribution system, pipeline and fitting. So there are one main pipeline. It goes through various floors of the hospital, and once it enters into that floor, then it goes to the ward. From the ward, it will give you a dropping, and in the dropping, you will attach the ventilator points. So that is how it is done. And oxygen should be maintaining a pressure of 4.2 bars, definitely. In ICU, we need to give 2 connections of oxygen. OT, we can give 1 connection of oxygen, 1 nitrous. There is a debate now, they don't want to use nitrous, they can use, galvanized other, halothane or, isoflurane and stuff like that. But yes, it is given that we need to give a nitrous. There are terminal units, and we need to have a method of checking the pressure at the terminal unit. If 4.2 bar is not coming out, there will be some leakage in the pipeline system. Of course, there is an alarm system, but even after the installation of an alarm system, if the pressure comes lesser than 3.9 bar, then it will be a problem for the patient. The ventilator will not function. So those are some issues that we need to be a little careful. We need an alarm system is given, but even then there will be a leakage because there is a valve. If the valve is kinked, then obviously there will be continually leakage of that oxygen.
So for all this arrangement, I think meticulous planning is very essential for the optimal utilization of the resources.
Yes. So
because you cannot do today, we are building this, this is not done properly, so let us build it like this. So we really cannot do like that.
Yes. So when we design hospitals, we have 2 choices, and we can give the points in all the beds, or we can leave aside the general wards and give in the ICU and the single rooms. But I don't think it is a good habit. we give it in all the bed. That is a better practice. What you said is also correct. The consumption pattern also has to be forecasted. That is, consumption pattern is forecasted by the utilization of the ICU and utilization of the OT. How many cases are you doing in the OT? And what is the nature of cases and what is the oxygen consumption per day? Based on that, you will do the forecasting as well as also the designing from the beginning. Or else it is very simple. You have the main drawing of the hospital complex and you put a pipeline, install the manifold in certain places wherever you find comfortable, maybe outside. You can do it in the basement also, but there should be a proper aeration. Manifold should not have a closed enclosure. It should have a proper aeration, so air could come and air could go. Preferably no electrical points to be inside the manifold room, preferably, because there is a oxygen is a conductor for fire. So in case of there is a spark or something, then it will blast. There is an event for a fire. So that is the manifold. But otherwise, we can put the pipeline. Now there are so very many make and model. We have Indian system, and now our Prime Minister is very pushy on account of Make in India and CDSCO certification. People in the past have done some, little goof-ups. So they have this beautiful habit of getting equipment or pipeline system from Europe or other countries, for which they will be charging a bomb, and sometimes the buyer or gets very fascinated by those specifications and whatever. But nowadays they are all gone. Nobody can purchase, and they need to have a Make in India certification for all the components, and of course because they are all coming under the medical devices, so they had to have CDSCO certification also. So FDA doesn't work in India and EU doesn't work, so you need to have CDSCO. Yeah, so that is but now people have gotten used to it, and there are many equipment now, apart from the pipeline and all, they are being manufactured in India and very easily done so. Now we talked about oxygen, we talked about nitrous oxide, and then of course compressed air. So compressed air it sucks the air from the atmosphere and compresses it. So the compressed air is good for drill bit. There is a drilling. You can have drill in the knee joints, or and of course that can be used for even cutting the sternum and so on. So you can use it for multiple. Vacuum is, of course, we know what is vacuum, and all the suctions. So you don't need to have a portable vacuum machine all over. So you can have a centralized vacuum. The distribution, I have told you how the by and large they are all copper pipes. And if the building is constructed and not being used, let us assume for a period of 1 year or 2 years, for some reason, then it is proved definitely that the pipes will leak. They'll get cracked. Now the problem will be, since they are copper pipes, they cannot be done by welding by the normal welder. So people who are used to air conditioning system, they are used to copper welding.
Yeah. Even most of the SE repair people installing, they carry that.
Yes, so that is one, and the technique is called soap and water test. So you put soap and water liquid in a mug or a container and put it, and like a normally like the tires and all, so the same. It is called soap and water test. So these are all things, but there is an ISO standard. All this that I mentioned, they have to be on a basis of a standard, which is an ISO standard. Terminal units, I told you, there are all valves.
Sir, normally how many years does this pipe for different element they sustain? Do they sustain for 2 decades, 1 decade?
Definitely, they have a quite good life if the maintenance and is good. I don't think things will go wrong. What can go wrong is if it is not in use, then sometimes there will be a crack and a leak. That's the only thing. Else, it's a permanent fixture of the building. So it's not an equipment that you can take it off and add on a new thing. Only thing is that you can add on some sources of, once the pipeline is set, now you have another building in the nearby and you want to join it. Probably you can give an additional connection. Only the length of pipe will be a variable. You don't have to have a separate plant.
Okay.
So that is one. I think the pressure has to be monitored, the oxygen pressure. by pressure gauge. It is called a manual pressure gauge. So the nurses can be trained to do it, or maybe a technician can do one sortie and one round and of the whole hospital and then find out what is the leakage and all. Alarm system, I think we have discussed. Now these are things, as you asked me, how much is the life? Everything would have life. The flooring which you use as a PV flooring or polyvinyl flooring, would have a life of 5 to 10. But if they are maintained well, I think they will last for 15 to 20 years, which is a good time. These pipelines do not have a, unless they are exposed to certain bad, maintenance. So we can have a routine maintenance, we can have a planned maintenance, preventive. I feel that last time also I mentioned, we should have a comprehensive maintenance plan. Now, it is given that the person or the company which has installed the MGPS system, they should provide a man or a team of 2 people for a period of 1 to 2 years, during which they will train the hospital boys and girls or technicians who are not exposed to that system. It can have so that should be built in. Then there is a defect liability period. Defect liability period can be minimum 1 year, but certain organizations have a habit of giving it to 2 years. So during that defect liability period, some 10% or 20% is retained. That is called retention money. So during that period, if there is something conks off, then the vendor or the supplier will have to replace it. So that is called retention period and the defect liability period. I mentioned about the comprehensive maintenance. Second is, of course, predictive and corrective maintenance. Emergency maintenance, breakdown. And of course, so spare doesn't come into play when you do comprehensive. Comprehensive means everything included. And the vendor would take a charge, which is okay. But you are very happy and not bothered about what will go wrong, for that particular period of time. You need to have a workshop in order to cater to these requirements, because everybody cannot solve a problem of HVAC or welding or blacksmith. So we need to have a workshop which will be catering to all these functions. Now, certain salient points before we close out is that what should be the area of a particular building. So this area is dependent on the FAR, floor area ratio, or FSI, floor space index. So we can have, there is a setback that we need to provide for, which should be for at least 6 meters or 20 feet, around, so as to mobilize the fire vehicle to go around the hospital. Dual sources of water, at least, you need to have dual sources of water. Electricity, as you asked me, what is the consumption? You asked me for how much can per bed wise.
Yeah.
It cannot be specified, but on a ballpark you can have, maybe 5 kVA per bed. kV means kilovolt ampere.
Yeah.
So biomedical waste, we all know that is around 1.5 to 2 kg per bed. The lifts also are there. The speed of the lift should be maintained at 0.25 to 0.05 meters per second. What should be the lux of that light? So in OT we have to have 1000 to 2000, but otherwise we can have around 100 lux. We all know what's the engineering grid, because that is how we design a hospital, and what should be the grid, around 1.6 meters. Width is, we maintain at least around 2.4 meters, corridors. So that is, when you do a space planning, all the functional areas you have to add, and add around 40% as circulatory areas. Circulatory areas looks after the verandas, the corridors, the lift lobbies and stuff like that. But these are things that we can use as a, and before we close, I think we can spend some time with the biomedical equipment that is also coming under the
Sir, but before that, I have a question, sir. Most of the hospital, is it wise to have, because they in a part of the human resource and other equipment maintenance, it is advisable, do they have a permanent staff regarding all this engineering service who will be provided, or these days many people, they do outsourcing, outsourcing of different services.
Yes.
So what are the different pros and cons of having their own permanent staff, taking care of their own equipment, and
Yeah.
and
So
what are
let
the
me
pros and cons?
let me try, because we also do the same thing. In hospitals, we have their own people for maintaining the services, as you mentioned. Yes, that used to be the habit, and many corporate hospitals will continue to do that. But now, not now, for the last couple of years, Government of India, some state governments and other agencies have come out with something called Facility Management Agency. The facility management agency will look after the gardening, the horticulture, the air conditioning, the MGPS, the laundry, and even kitchen included,
Yeah.
housekeeping included. Now, in this stuff, what happens now? Supposing for any government functionary or a person, according to the seniority, they will go up in their ladder and promotion, or after that, they will have a gratuity. But if you outsource it, the expenditure is the minimal, because you give the rates are all calculated on the basis of minimal wages,
Yeah.
according to that particular state or that particular, for skilled, unskilled, or semi-skilled. So, and the contracts are 1 year or maximum 2 years. So after the second year again you will have a never beyond 4 years, because after fifth year you have to give the gratuity.
Yeah.
So government saves money, or the hospital saves money. It is, and even for equipment, they don't need a biomedical engineer. So they said you put the maintenance and of the equipment also. So these are called facility management services. They have a requirement specified in the tender or advertisement, what the qualification of the engineer, and yeah, turnover criteria, number of manpower, PF and ESI, whether you have that captive people numbering 300 or 500, because you want to give a service to, let's say, Maulana Azhar Medical College or an Institute of Medical Sciences. So you need to have that many people, and so whether you are capable of administering
Those many people.
those many people, including maintaining their PFESI records, submitting the bills thereof. We do as well. We do for large organizations, but yeah. So that is how any government or any hospital would save money. So therefore they call it, and now it's a trend. So nobody gets a permanent job. It's called facility management services. The facility management services are inclusive of materials. So you do housekeeping, so you get the material also, gloves, chemicals, all included, buckets, trolleys, everything included. So you don't have to spend, the hospital doesn't spend a penny on account of housekeeping activity. So is security. So it can have a comprehensive facility management contract in the form of a SLA also, service level agreement, and then you can pay up on the defined basis. Or after 1 month, they will start raising the invoicing, and you can do the checking and whatever. Everything nowadays, most of the organizations are SAP based, so mostly it is online, but eventually you have to submit all the required proof and document. If they have a condition of SLA where there is a penalty clause, you need to be careful, because then you have agreed that failing which 10% of the this thing will be deducted, failing which 20% will be deducted.
Yeah. Suppose you hire a security person, but there is a theft. Yeah.
Yeah, those are SLA conditions.
Yeah.
But you have agreed that you
Yeah.
will be
Because
happy to deduct money from your
main
side.
purpose of the security is to protect the equipment particularly.
But things can go wrong. There are accidents; they can go wrong, and that is the advantage and beauty of an SLA vis-a-vis a contract. Plain contract and SLA, they have these kind of two differences. There are a lot of hearsay, but on account of the manpower required and the manpower deployed, I don't think it's a good habit or a good practice to do that, violate the conditions, because everything is automated and mechanized. How many people? Supposing you are supposed to deploy 50 people in the morning shift, 40 in the evening, and 25 in the night. So it's all timed. It is all punched.
Yeah.
So I don't think it is. You can goof up, and unless it is a manual system. SLA, if you are doing a housekeeping and somebody finds something wrong, and one complaint which is evidenced and proved, then there will be a deduction, because you have agreed to that 20% deduction on So, yeah, so that is how the provider or the hospital.
Yeah, I think over the period of time, this kind of arrangement has also improved the service, because earlier days, because of fixed government job, whether I am cleaning it or not, it doesn't make any difference. But
They don't
now,
have vehicles, they have a contract for giving a vehicle with a driver,
yeah,
and maybe ambulances with drivers, So
they
gone
may
are
have.
those days of
Yeah,
one ambulance, four drivers. You don't need to have four
yeah.
drivers, Why
No,
spend so
many
much
times they
money?
have driver, but they may not have vehicle. Vehicle they may have, but it is under service, so it is not operating. So this
Yeah,
kind of problems are often observed in different kind of
but
setup.
I guess it has opened up lot of business and avenues, other avenues for prospective hospital managers, and who can get into these kind of businesses. Well, the requirement, pre-qualification requirements are very high. So everybody cannot do. The turnover would be around 100 crores or 50 crores. It is too high.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to achieve that turnover, uh, you will take a lot of time to achieve that,
Yeah.
reach that turnover.
Actually, the difference between this business related to the particularly the hospital, and where the human service is related and other business, it is very sensitive area. So everything maybe go very nicely, but if
Yeah,
particular one mistake or one accident may bring to the disastrous situations also.
sure. So that is how it is. The difference is always, as you can see, I give you an example of a difference between a hotel and a hospital. The buildings are the same, barring a CSSD.
Yeah.
Rest of air conditioning is there, everything is there, kitchen is there, laundry is there, everything is. But in hotel, these risks are not there. On the contrary, the hospital is full of, so to say, risks and of course ethical consideration. So there is a lot of conflicting ideas. You can sometimes the situations could be going bad,
Yeah.
And of course, the sanitation, the hygiene criteria required in a hotel and a hospital, the infection control practices required differences in the hospital is much less than. Air conditioning requirement, as I mentioned, might not be required in the hotel. You just need cool air and
Yeah.
fresh air. That's all. But the air changes and pressure, not required.
Yeah.
So, all the air conditioning system, even your domestic air conditioner, which is a 1.5 TR machine, it has also have a, air changes and pressure. It has, there is an external unit, there is a internal unit.
Yeah.
Or the window AC can get the air from the outside. So, but then the standard requirements are a little different. And when you can achieve it by an engineering method, only thing is that you have to calculate and titrate the power consumption, and energy audit needs to be done. How much consumption is there? How best can we reduce it? Well, we can go back to the old system where you can have natural lighting on one side, so you don't have to switch on all the lights
Throughout the day.
throughout the day, and or maybe minimal lights. You can
Yeah.
can function.
I think for the efficiency purpose only these days, as per policy, many hospitals started installing the solar rooftop. At
That
least
is
so
that's the
that,
building mandatory requirement now. Any building, whether a residential building also, the government is pushing it, and they have got empaneled. Everybody should have,
yeah.
solar. They have given the liberty of, for the residents of having a 3 kilowatt or a 5 kilowatt, and they give some subsidy also, depending on the state. Delhi gives something else, probably West Bengal and Bihar will give something else, but there is a subsidy only to woo the, families and people to have the installation of solar. Well, these are all
Yeah, sir,
energy
you are talking
conservation
something
points.
about the biomedical.
Yeah, biomedical equipment, I think, we left out. That is also a part of the engineering services. We can, to answer your question, you can have it in-house, biomedical engineer, or you can do the outsourcing, who will maintain the equipment also, apart from the calibration that is required. Now, maintenance, what normally goes wrong is, by and large, monitors, the CT scan and MRI, they are not, but then there is a requirement that when you give it the purchase order, you need to have a terms and conditions. wherein you write maximum downtime shall be permitted is 2% or let's say 3%, failing which a penalty. So whenever you give a penalty clause, so people will be responsible. So it's mostly software driven. So by and large, that they know. What can go wrong is monitors, ventilators, sometimes cautery machines, sometimes. So we need to have a biomedical engineer. Biomedical engineer is supposed to maintain a master list of equipment. Then there is a distribution list, which is according to the departments, how many BP operators, how many ventilators, how many monitors.
What about the auto analyzer? Most of the hospital these days, the patho lab or biochemistry lab.
That is a conflicting issue. The industry drives the hospitals. The industry is more smarter than the hospital guys. So they think that, the doctors, you don't need to buy the equipment, we'll lease it out for you. But they don't understand. The doctors get mostly trapped. So they have sign off. The number of consumables or reagents per annum will be this huge quantity. They think the machine is free, let us pay for the reagents. But unfortunately, even 1/4 of the reagents is not consumed, and that is given in waste. So the unnecessary expenditure of money. See this equipment, there is a government of India, we need to have a depreciation of 33.3%, meaning thereby that the book value of that equipment shall be 0 after the end of the 3rd year, which is pretty much universal, same.
So technically every 3 years we have to purchase a new machine.
Well, it is your choice. Technically, yes, you can maintain it for 5 years, and during the procurement process, you need to have an arrangement written with the vendor or the manufacturer, with the Philips or GE or Siemens or any other company, that at the end of the 5th year, before 6 months, they will have a buyback.
Yeah.
The newer generation machine or equipment of that same nature,
they will replace
and they will replace this, and whatever the difference in price they can take. So those are things that you can do at the time of procurement. 2 years CMC, 2 years warranty, and 3 years CMC, comprehensive maintenance. So the machine is assured for 5 years. So then, that is very little role of the biomedical, apart from the downtime maintenance, because the CMC value will be, let's say, for an average CT scanner will be, let us assume 35 lakhs, which is a big deal, which is a big money per annum. Now, if you do a penalty clause and calculate the downtime exceeds, and put a heavy penalty onto the vendor, then you are saving money on account of 35 lakhs, it can come down to 10 lakhs only. You have saved 25 lakhs. So those are the requirements for a biomedical engineer who has to maintain the downtime also. Apart from the once you have distribution list is done, then you do the calibration. So calibration for all the equipment, which has to be both, traceability certificate has to be obtained from the international standard. That is once done, then all the equipment might not need a CMC. A furniture would not need CMC. So you can divide which equipment needs CMC and which you can do it in-house. So those biomedical engineers, some little shouldering will be required, some degree, they can do it, smaller stuff. But once it goes a life-saving, which is called a ventilator or this, then I think they all should be subjected to a comprehensive maintenance scheme. So, well, that is because this gentleman or person is responsible for a huge cost of equipment. The cost of equipment is also huge, and unfortunately, they don't have any idea of how much price did the hospital buy it for. So they have to maintain the history sheet, they have to maintain the calibration logs, and the service engineer for each and every person is different. They need to have a contact number of the service engineer whom they would be calling in the event of a breakdown or shutdown. So those are stuff that are required for a biomedical engineer.
Yeah. So I think today about the engineering services of the hospital, we have done very comprehensive discussions about this topic, and we are very much thankful to you, sir, for sharing your experiences, not only the subject. So I hope all these students must be benefit through these discussions. And here I would like to say thanks again, sir, and thanks to all the students, as well as thanks to the team of EMPC who is helping us to broadcast this program. Thank you very much to you. Thank you. Namaskar.
Such reputed institution across the country. Perhaps there is no one in the country who doesn't know about IGNOU, the courses they offer, the